I see you'd like me to create a complete story based on the title, At My Son's Funeral, My Daughter-in-Law Said, Stop Crying, Pack Your Bags, and Get Out Now. This would be structured as a dramatic narrative with 8 distinct parts. Let me write this for you as requested. My name is William, 62 years old, standing at my only son's funeral, with tears streaming down my weathered face. Jennifer, my daughter-in-law, approached as I placed a flower on David's casket. Her face, emotionless voice, cold as winter. "Stop crying, William. It's inappropriate," she whispered. "Pack your bags and get out of my house within 30 days. I need to move on." I stood frozen, the grief of losing my son now compounded by homelessness. I simply nodded, smiled sadly, and walked away. But what she didn't know was that I had already made a call that morning, one that would change everything. If you're watching this video, let me know where you're from, and if you've ever had to stand up to someone during your darkest hour. Hit like and subscribe if you believe that justice eventually finds its way to those who deserve it. Looking back, I remember the day David brought Jennifer home to meet me as if it were yesterday. My son beamed with pride as he introduced his new girlfriend, his arm wrapped protectively around her slender shoulders. I had prepared a special dinner, David's favorite pot roast with all the trimmings, wanting to make a good impression on the woman who had captured my son's heart. "Dad, this is Jennifer," David said, his voice full of that particular warmth, reserved only for those we truly love. "Jen, this is my father, William." Jennifer was undeniably beautiful, with flowing auburn hair and intelligent green eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. Her smile was dazzling as she extended her hand. "I've heard so much about you, Mr. Mitchell. David talks about you constantly." "All good things, I hope," I joked, clasping her hand in both of mine. "And please call me William. Mr. Mitchell was my father." That first evening went wonderfully. Jennifer was charming, asking thoughtful questions about my career as an architect before retirement, seeming genuinely interested in the stories I shared about David's childhood. By the time they left that night, I was nearly as enchanted with her as my son was. David had always been my pride and joy. After my wife Catherine died from breast cancer, when David was just 15, it had been just the two of us against the world. We weathered the storm of grief together, forming a bond that went beyond the typical father-son relationship. We were partners, confidants, best friends. Catherine's death had left a hole in both our lives, but somehow we had managed to fill it with even more love for each other. I put everything into making sure David had every opportunity, working overtime to save for his college education, attending every soccer game and school function, staying up late to help with science projects and math homework. My efforts paid off. David graduated at the top of his class, earned a full scholarship to Stanford, and eventually became a successful software engineer at a prominent tech company. At 36, he had built a comfortable life for himself, financially stable, respected in his field, and now apparently in love with Jennifer. Their courtship was brief but intense. Within 6 months of that first dinner at my house, David called to tell me they were engaged. "Are you sure, son?" I asked, concerned. Not about Jennifer specifically, but about the speed with which the relationship had progressed. "You haven't known her very long." When it's right, Dad," he replied with the confidence of the truly smitten. "I've never been more certain of anything in my life." The wedding was a lavish affair, far more extravagant than I would have expected from my normally practical son. Jennifer, it seemed, had expensive tastes, and David was eager to fulfill her every wish. I contributed what I could to the celebration, though my retirement savings were modest. During the reception, I overheard Jennifer talking to one of her bridesmaids. David's father is sweet, but so old-fashioned. Can you believe he still lives in that tiny bungalow? David says it's filled with all these old memories he can't let go of. I pretended not to hear, but the comment stung. The tiny bungalow had been my home with Catherine, the place where we had raised our son, created countless happy memories. It wasn't grand, but it was paid for and filled with love. After the honeymoon, David and Jennifer purchased a beautiful house in an upscale neighborhood. The down payment, I later learned, came largely from David's savings, money he'd been putting aside for years. The house was impressive. 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, a gourmet kitchen, and a backyard with a built-in barbecue and fire pit. It was far more house than 2 people needed, but Jennifer insisted they needed to plan for the future. That future arrived 18 months later with the birth of their daughter, Lily. David called me from the hospital, his voice trembling with emotion. "Dad, she's perfect. 10 fingers, 10 toes, and Catherine's eyes. I wish Mom could see her. She can son," I said, my own eyes filling with tears. "In her own way, she can." I arrived at the hospital with flowers and a small stuffed rabbit that had once belonged to David. Jennifer seemed less than thrilled with my gift. "It's a bit worn, isn't it?" she commented, examining the rabbit with barely concealed distaste. "It was David's when he was a baby," I explained. "Your grandmother made it for you," I added, looking at my son. David took the rabbit from Jennifer and gently placed it in the bassinet beside his newborn daughter. "And now it's Lily's, a family tradition." As the months passed, I threw myself into the role of doting grandfather. I visited as often as seemed reasonable, always calling ahead to make sure it was convenient. I brought small gifts for Lily, offered to babysit whenever needed, and tried to be helpful without being intrusive. It was during this time that the first real tensions with Jennifer began to surface. She had very specific ideas about how Lily should be raised, from the organic baby food she insisted on to the educational toys that filled the nursery. "No offense, William," she said one afternoon, as I played peek-a-boo with 7-month-old Lily. "But child development has come a long way since you raised David. Babies need stimulation for proper cognitive growth. We managed to raise a pretty smart one without all these gadgets," I replied, trying to keep my tone light. "Sometimes simple play is the best stimulation." Jennifer's lips thinned into a tight smile. "Well, times change. We want to give Lily every advantage." Around Lily's first birthday, David called me with an unexpected proposal. "Dad, how would you feel about selling your house and moving in with us? We have that guest suite in the basement that's just sitting empty, and with both of us working full-time now, we could really use the help with Lily." I was surprised but touched by the offer. "Are you sure, son? What about Jennifer? How does she feel about having her father-in-law underfoot?" "It was actually Jen's idea," David assured me. "She says it's silly for you to be rattling around in that big house by yourself when we have all this extra space." The thought of giving up my home of 40 years was daunting, but the opportunity to be a daily part of my granddaughter's life was too tempting to resist. Plus, the big house Jennifer had referred to was actually quite modest, a 3-bedroom ranch-style home that had become increasingly difficult for me to maintain as I aged. After much consideration, I accepted the offer. I sold my house using part of the proceeds to pay off my outstanding debts and investing the rest for my future needs. The guest suite in David and Jennifer's home was comfortable enough. A bedroom, small sitting area, and private bathroom. It wasn't home, but it was close to my son and granddaughter, and that mattered more to me than familiar surroundings. The arrangement worked well initially. I helped care for Lily while David and Jennifer prepared dinner most evenings and tackled small maintenance projects around the house. I contributed to household expenses, insisted on paying rent. Though David tried to refuse, and made myself scarce when I sensed the young family needed privacy. Jennifer seemed pleased with the arrangement, especially once she realized how much money they were saving on childcare, and how convenient it was to have a reliable babysitter on premises. David was simply happy to have me there, often stopping by my suite in the evenings to chat or watch a ball game together after Lily was in bed. "This was a good idea, Dad," he told me one night about 6 months after I'd moved in. "Having you here. It's like having a piece of Mom here too, you know." I understood exactly what he meant. In many ways, I had become the keeper of Catherine's memory, the living link to the mother David had lost too young. I shared stories about her with both David and little Lily, keeping her presence alive in our family. As Lily grew from baby to toddler, our bond strengthened. She was a bright, curious child, with David's gentle nature and Catherine's infectious laugh. She called me Papa and would often toddle down to my suite first thing in the morning, climbing into my lap for stories before breakfast. It was during Lily's second year that I began to notice subtle changes in Jennifer's behavior. What had once been occasional irritation at my old-fashioned parenting suggestions became frequent criticism. She questioned my choices of books for Lily, the snacks I prepared, even the way I folded the laundry. "William, I've asked you repeatedly to separate the whites and colors," she snapped one afternoon, finding me sorting clothes in the laundry room. "And these organic cotton onesies need to be washed in cold water only. They're expensive." "I've been doing laundry for over 40 years, Jennifer," I replied, trying to keep my voice even. "I think I know how to wash clothes without ruining them." She rolled her eyes. "Well, clearly not these clothes. Just let me handle Lily's things from now on." These incidents increased in frequency and intensity. Jennifer began to exclude me from family outings, claiming they needed nuclear family time. She rearranged my carefully organized kitchen, replacing familiar cookware with new gadgets I didn't know how to use. She criticized the meals I prepared as too heavy or too old-fashioned, despite David and Lily's obvious enjoyment of my cooking. David tried to smooth things over, caught in the uncomfortable position of mediator between his wife and father. "She's just stressed about work," he would explain after particularly tense exchanges. "The marketing firm is under a lot of pressure right now. She doesn't mean anything by it." I tried to be understanding, to give Jennifer the benefit of the doubt. After all, it couldn't be easy having an in-law living in your home, observing your parenting, being a constant presence. I made efforts to be less intrusive, to defer to her preferences regarding Lily's care, to stay out of the way when she seemed particularly irritable. But despite my best efforts, the atmosphere in the house grew increasingly strained. Jennifer spent more and more time on her phone, often stepping outside for what she called work calls that left her flushed and distracted upon return. David worked longer hours, coming home exhausted and preoccupied. Only Lily seemed unchanged, her sunny disposition a balm to my increasingly worried heart. Then, about 3 years after I moved in, David began experiencing chest pains. At first, he dismissed them as indigestion or stress, popping antacids and brushing off my concerns. "I'm fine, Dad," he insisted. "Just too much of your delicious lasagna." But I recognized the signs. Catherine had complained of similar pains in the weeks before her diagnosis. I urged David to see a doctor, even going so far as to make an appointment for him. "You're overreacting," Jennifer told me when I mentioned my concerns. "David works out 3 times a week and eats reasonably well. He's just stressed about the new project at work." Eventually, David did see a doctor, returning from the appointment with a prescription for acid reflux medication and instructions to reduce stress. He assured me everything was fine, but something in his eyes told me otherwise. My son had never been a good liar. What did the doctor really say? I pressed when Jennifer wasn't around. David sighed, running a hand through his hair, a gesture so like his mother's that it made my heart ache. They found some irregularities in my EKG. Nothing major, just something to monitor. I'm scheduled for more tests next month. Does Jennifer know? I didn't want to worry her, he admitted. With the pressure she's under at work and taking care of Lily, she doesn't need one more thing on her plate. I wanted to argue, to insist that he tell his wife about his health concerns, but it wasn't my place to interfere in their marriage. Instead, I promised to keep his confidence while encouraging him to be open with Jennifer. The following weeks were tense. David seemed increasingly fatigued, often coming home from work and going straight to bed. Jennifer was frequently absent, claiming late meetings and client dinners. I cared for Lily more and more, trying to maintain a sense of normalcy for my granddaughter, while worrying constantly about my son. Then came the morning that changed everything. David had stayed home from work, complaining of extreme fatigue. Jennifer had left early for what she described as an important presentation, leaving Lily in my care. I was preparing lunch when I heard a crash from David's home office. I found him collapsed on the floor, unconscious, his face ashen. The moments that followed were a blur of frantic 911 calls, paramedics rushing through the house, desperate attempts at resuscitation. But in my heart, I knew. My son was gone before the ambulance ever arrived. The official cause was a massive heart attack, a congenital condition that had gone undiagnosed until it was too late. The same condition that had likely killed my father at a similarly young age. A genetic time bomb that neither of us had known David was carrying. As I sat in the kitchen, numb with shock and grief, holding 3-year-old Lily, who didn't understand why the doctors took Daddy away, I called Jennifer. The phone rang several times before she answered, sounding irritated at the interruption. "William, I'm in the middle of something important. Can this wait?" "Jennifer," I managed, my voice breaking. "You need to come home. It's David. He's gone." There was a long pause before she responded, her voice suddenly small. "What do you mean gone?" "Heart attack. The paramedics. They couldn't save him. He's gone, Jennifer. David is gone." What followed was the surreal process of death. Notification of relatives, arrangement of funeral services, selection of caskets and flowers, all while trying to explain to a 3-year-old why Daddy wasn't coming back. Jennifer moved through these tasks with an efficiency that was almost frightening. Her grief contained behind a wall of practicality that I couldn't penetrate. I, on the other hand, was drowning in sorrow. David had been my world since Catherine's death. My son, my friend, my purpose. Without him, I felt adrift, anchored only by my love for Lily and my promise to David to always look after his little girl. It was at the funeral home the day before the service that I first noticed the man, tall, well-dressed, hovering at Jennifer's elbow as she selected flowers, his hand occasionally resting on the small of her back, in a gesture that seemed too familiar for a business associate or casual friend. When I asked Jennifer who he was, she replied curtly, "Greg is a colleague. He's been very supportive during this difficult time." I said nothing more, but a seed of suspicion was planted, one that would grow rapidly in the days to come. The funeral was well attended. David had been popular among his co-workers and maintained many friendships from college and even high school. I stood beside Jennifer at the cemetery as friends and colleagues offered condolences, watching as she accepted their sympathy with composed grace, not a tear in sight. It was only when we returned to the house when the last of the mourners had departed, and Lily had finally fallen into exhausted sleep, that Jennifer approached me in the kitchen, where I sat staring into a cold cup of coffee. "William," she began, her voice cool and detached, "we need to discuss arrangements going forward." I looked up momentarily confused. "Arrangements?" "Yes. Now that David is gone, certain things will need to change. This house, for instance. It's too large for just Lily and me, and frankly too expensive to maintain on my salary alone." "I can contribute more," I offered immediately. "I still have some savings and my Social Security." "That's not necessary." She cut me off. "Actually, I've been thinking it might be best if you found your own place." The words hit me like a physical blow. My own place, but this is my home. Our home, yours, mine, and Lily's. Jennifer's expression hardened. It was David's home. He's gone now, and I need to make decisions for myself and my daughter. Lily needs stability right now, I argued, struggling to keep my voice steady. She's just lost her father. She shouldn't lose her grandfather, too. "She won't lose you," Jennifer said, though her tone suggested otherwise. "You can visit, of course. But having you here, it's a constant reminder of what we've lost. I need to move on, William. For Lily's sake." I stared at her, this woman I had never fully understood, but had accepted for my son's sake. "Move on, Jennifer. It's been 3 days. Something flashed in her eyes. Anger, guilt, I couldn't tell. "I'm giving you 30 days to make arrangements. That's more than generous." As she turned to leave, I found my voice again. "And what will you tell Lily when Papa suddenly disappears from her life?" Jennifer paused at the doorway. "Children are adaptable. She'll adjust." With those cold words, she left me sitting in the kitchen of what had been my home for the past 3 years, contemplating a future suddenly as empty as the chair across from me where David used to sit. That night, as I lay awake in my bed, grief and worry warring in my mind, I made a decision. Jennifer might want me gone, but I would not abandon my granddaughter so easily. David had trusted me to be there for Lily, and no matter what it took, I would honor that trust. The question was how the house was in David and Jennifer's names, not mine. I had no legal claim to remain, no legal right to Lily beyond what Jennifer allowed. As dawn broke, I reached for my phone and called the one person who might be able to help. Martin Goldman, the attorney who had handled my house sale and had been a friend since our college days. "I need advice, Marty," I said when he answered, "and I think I might need a lawyer." The day after the funeral dawned gray and rainy, matching my mood perfectly, as I sat at the kitchen table nursing a cup of coffee and trying to wrap my mind around the events of the past week. My son was gone, buried yesterday in the cemetery plot beside his mother. My daughter-in-law wanted me out of the house within a month, and my precious granddaughter, still too young to fully comprehend the permanence of death, kept asking when Daddy was coming home. The house was quiet. Jennifer had taken Lily to her parents' home for the day, ostensibly to give me space to grieve, but more likely to distance herself from the uncomfortable reality of my continued presence. I had spent the morning going through David's personal effects in his home office, a task Jennifer had shown remarkably little interest in tackling. Among the files in his desk drawer, I found a folder labeled Family Documents, containing insurance policies, the deed to the house, and, to my surprise, a last will and testament dated just 6 months prior. I hadn't known David had prepared a will. Given his youth and apparent good health, I wouldn't have expected him to consider such matters. But my son had always been responsible, always planning ahead. My hands trembled slightly as I opened the document, scanning its contents with growing amazement. David had named me not Jennifer as executor of his estate. More significantly, he had established a trust for Lily with me as the trustee. The house, which I had assumed was jointly owned by David and Jennifer, was in fact solely in David's name, with provisions for Jennifer and Lily to remain there, but with oversight from the trust. Most surprising of all was a codicil added just 2 months ago, stating that in the event of his death, I was to have joint legal custody of Lily alongside Jennifer. It was as if David had somehow sensed his time was limited and had taken steps to ensure both his daughter and his father would be protected. I was still absorbing these revelations when the doorbell rang. Marty Goldman stood on the porch, his weathered face somber beneath salt and pepper hair. "I came as soon as I could," he said, embracing me briefly. "How are you holding up, Bill?" "About as well as can be expected," I replied, leading him inside. "Thank you for coming on such short notice." We settled in the living room and I explained the situation. David's sudden death, Jennifer's demand that I vacate the house, and my concerns about maintaining a relationship with Lily. Then I showed him the documents I had discovered. Marty read through them carefully, his expression increasingly thoughtful. "Bill, do you know if Jennifer is aware of these arrangements?" "I don't think so. She's barely looked at any of David's papers, and she seems to assume the house is hers outright." "Well, she's in for a surprise," Marty said, tapping the will. "This is quite clear. As executor, you have significant control over David's estate, including the house. And this codicil regarding joint custody is unusual, but perfectly legal given the circumstances." Hope flickered to life within me. So she can't just throw me out. Not legally, no. In fact, based on these documents, you have more right to be here than she does. Marty leaned forward, his expression serious. "But Bill, I have to warn you. This could get messy. Jennifer is unlikely to accept these terms without a fight." "I'm prepared for that," I said more firmly than I felt. "This isn't about me wanting to stay in the house. It's about honoring David's wishes and being there for Lily. She needs stability right now, not to lose another person she loves." Marty nodded, understanding in his eyes. "I'll file these with the probate court today and notify Jennifer's attorney, assuming she has one. In the meantime, don't move out, don't agree to any arrangements, and document everything. If Jennifer tries to restrict your access to Lily, write it down with dates and times." After Marty left, I sat in David's office for a long time, staring at a family photo on his desk. David, Jennifer, and Lily at the beach last summer, all smiles and sunlight. What had changed in the months since that happy day? Had David sensed problems in his marriage? Is that why he had updated his will with such specific provisions? I was still pondering these questions when Jennifer and Lily returned late that afternoon. My granddaughter ran to me immediately, throwing her small arms around my legs. "Papa, I made you a picture at Grandma's house." She thrust a crayon drawing into my hands, a collection of colorful stick figures that she proudly identified as Mommy, Me, You, and Daddy in Heaven. "It's beautiful, sweetheart," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "Let's put it right here on the refrigerator where everyone can see it." Jennifer watched this exchange with narrowed eyes, her mouth a tight line of disapproval. Once Lily was settled with her toys in the living room, Jennifer cornered me in the kitchen. "Have you started looking for apartments?" she asked without preamble. I took a deep breath, steadying myself for the confrontation to come. "Actually, Jennifer, I've been going through David's papers today. Did you know he had prepared a will?" Her expression flickered, surprise quickly masked by irritation. "He mentioned something about it." "Why?" "Because as it turns out, I'm the executor of his estate. And according to the terms of the will, this house is to be held in trust for Lily, with me as the trustee." The color drained from Jennifer's face. "That's ridiculous. We bought this house together. It's jointly owned. The deed says otherwise, I replied, keeping my voice level. The house is solely in David's name. You have the right to live here with Lily, but you don't own it outright. And you certainly don't have the authority to evict me. Jennifer's composure cracked, anger flashing in her eyes. You're lying. David would never do that to me. I'm not lying, and he wasn't doing anything to you. He was protecting Lily's inheritance. My attorney has already filed the will with probate court. You're welcome to review it with your own lawyer. For a moment, Jennifer seemed at a loss for words. Then she straightened her shoulders, her voice turning cold. Fine. We'll see what the court has to say about this little arrangement. But don't think this changes anything, William. One way or another, I will have control of this house and my daughter's future. With that, she stalked from the room, leaving me shaken but resolute. The battle lines had been drawn, and it was clear Jennifer would not accept David's wishes without a fight. But for the first time since his death, I felt a glimmer of hope. My son had provided me with the tools to protect both myself and Lily. Now it was up to me to use them wisely. The next morning, I awoke to the sound of voices in the living room. Jennifer and a man whose voice I recognized as Greg, the colleague from the funeral. Their conversation, though hushed, was intense enough that fragments reached me through the partially open door of my suite. She says the house is in his name only. Can't be right. You paid for half of it. Trust for the girl with him as trustee. Fight it, obviously. Get a good lawyer. Quietly, I reached for my phone and activated the voice recorder app, placing it near the door. It wasn't something I would have considered doing before, but Martin's advice to document everything seemed prudent given the circumstances. The conversation continued, becoming more revealing as they apparently believed me to be still asleep. What about the life insurance? Greg asked. 2 policies, Jennifer replied. The smaller one through his work names me as beneficiary. That's about $200,000. The larger one, $1 million plus, names Lily with his father as custodian until she's 21. Jesus, Jen. Did David suspect something? This seems like he was preparing for the worst. How would he know? We were careful. My blood ran cold at the implication. Had Jennifer been having an affair with this man while my son was alive? Had David somehow discovered it? Their voices dropped even lower, and I strained to hear. What about selling the house anyway? Greg suggested. The old man can't stop you if it's already done. By the time the courts sort it out, we could be settled in Chicago. Maybe, Jennifer sounded thoughtful. I'll talk to a real estate agent today, see how quickly we could list it. I had heard enough. Stopping the recording, I dressed quickly and called Marty. They're planning to sell the house out from under me, I explained after bringing him up to speed on what I'd overheard. Can they do that? Not legally, Marty assured me. As executor and trustee, any sale would require your approval. But to be safe, I'll file an additional notice with the county recorder's office today, specifically flagging the property as subject to probate restrictions. That should prevent any reputable agent or title company from proceeding without proper authorization. And what about this conversation I recorded? Is that usable in court? Marty hesitated. Washington is a 2-party consent state for recordings, so technically no. But the content of the conversation could still be relevant if it comes to a custody dispute. Keep recording if you can do so safely, but understand we can't use the actual recordings as evidence. After ending the call, I sat on the edge of my bed, trying to process what I had learned. Jennifer and Greg had been involved while David was alive. They were planning to sell the house and potentially move to Chicago with Lily. And David, my son, had somehow anticipated at least some of this, taking legal steps to protect his daughter's inheritance and her relationship with me. The grief I had been struggling to contain since David's death was now joined by a simmering anger, not just at Jennifer's betrayal of my son, but at her callous disregard for Lily's well-being. Moving a 3-year-old away from her home and the only other parent figure in her life, mere weeks after losing her father, showed a selfishness that was hard to fathom. Before I could dwell further on these thoughts, there was a soft knock at my door. I opened it to find Lily in her pajamas, clutching her stuffed rabbit, the same one I had given her in the hospital after her birth. "Papa, I had a bad dream," she said, her lower lip trembling. "Daddy was calling me, but I couldn't find him." My heart ached as I knelt to her level, opening my arms. "Oh, sweetheart, that must have been scary." She nodded, burying her face against my shoulder. "Can I have pancakes? Daddy always made pancakes when I had bad dreams." "Of course you can," I said, lifting her into my arms. "Let's go make some right now. And maybe we can use blueberries to make smiley faces, just like Daddy used to do." As we headed to the kitchen, I caught sight of Jennifer and Greg in the living room, their conversation halting abruptly at our appearance. Greg had the grace to look uncomfortable quickly, making an excuse about needing to get to work. Jennifer, however, merely watched us with calculating eyes as I helped Lily onto a stool at the kitchen counter and began gathering ingredients for pancakes. "I thought I'd take Lily shopping today," Jennifer announced, joining us in the kitchen. "She needs some new clothes for preschool." "Can Papa come too?" Lily asked, happily stirring the pancake batter I'd prepared. Jennifer's smile was tight. "Not today, honey. This is going to be special mommy-daughter time." I said nothing, focusing on heating the griddle to the perfect temperature, but I noted the manipulation for what it was. Another attempt to separate me from my granddaughter. The pattern was becoming clear. Jennifer would try to exclude me from family activities, gradually reducing my role in Lily's life until my absence became the new normal. Well, I had news for Jennifer Mitchell. I wasn't going anywhere, and I certainly wasn't giving up on my granddaughter without a fight. David had given me the legal tools to protect our family, and I intended to use them to their fullest extent. As I flipped blueberry smiley face pancakes and listened to Lily's innocent chatter, I silently thanked my son for his foresight. Whatever came next, I would face it with the same quiet determination that had seen me through the loss of my wife, and now my only child. For Lily's sake and for David's memory, I would stand my ground. The next 2 weeks unfolded in a strange, tense dance around the house. Jennifer maintained a cold formality toward me, limiting our interactions to brief, necessary communications about household matters. At the same time, she began a systematic campaign to reduce my time with Lily, scheduling playdates, dance classes, and shopping excursions during hours when I would normally have been caring for my granddaughter. I documented each instance as Marty had advised, keeping a detailed log of dates, times, and circumstances. I also continued to review David's papers, discovering financial records that painted a concerning picture. Despite their substantial combined income, David and Jennifer had accumulated significant credit card debt over the past year. Most troubling were large charges from hotels and restaurants in Seattle on days when David had been traveling for work. Charges that appeared on Jennifer's personal credit card statements, which had apparently been paid from their joint account. The implications were clear, confirming my suspicions about Jennifer's relationship with Greg. What I couldn't determine was whether David had been aware of the affair. Had he discovered Jennifer's infidelity? Was that what prompted the changes to his will and trust arrangements? The timing suggested it might be so. The codicil regarding my joint custody of Lily had been added just 2 months before his death, around the time these suspicious charges began appearing regularly. Meanwhile, the legal process moved forward. Marty filed the necessary paperwork with the probate court, officially registering me as executor of David's estate and trustee of Lily's trust. He also filed the notice with the county recorder's office, ensuring that any attempt to sell the house would be flagged for review. Jennifer, as expected, hired her own attorney, an aggressive divorce lawyer named Stephanie Keller, known for her take-no-prisoners approach. Ms. Keller promptly filed objections to the will, claiming that David had been unduly influenced by me and that the document did not reflect his true intentions. She also requested an emergency hearing to determine temporary custody arrangements for Lily, arguing that my presence in the home was disruptive to the child's grieving process. Marty assured me these tactics were standard, but unlikely to succeed given the clear language of David's will and the lack of any evidence supporting Jennifer's claims. Nevertheless, they necessitated responses hearings and legal fees that steadily eroded my modest savings. The situation came to a head on a rainy Tuesday morning, precisely 18 days after David's funeral. I was preparing breakfast for Lily, who sat at the kitchen counter coloring a picture of what she described as our family in heaven and on earth, a heartbreaking illustration of how her young mind was processing her father's death. Jennifer entered the kitchen dressed for work, her expression darkening at the domestic scene before her. "Lily, go get your raincoat. We need to leave for school in 5 minutes." "But I'm not done with my breakfast," Lily protested, pointing to the half-eaten toast and scrambled eggs I had prepared. "You can take it in the car," Jennifer said dismissively. "We're running late." "I can drive her," I offered. "That way she can finish eating properly." Jennifer's eyes narrowed. "That won't be necessary. I've adjusted my schedule specifically to handle Lily's transportation myself." "All her transportation?" I asked, keeping my tone mild, though I could see where this was heading. "Pick up as well?" "Yes. In fact, after school she has a play date with Madison, and then we're having dinner with Greg to discuss some business matters. We probably won't be home until after her bedtime." The calculated exclusion was so transparent, it was almost laughable, but I maintained my composure for Lily's sake. "I see. Well, perhaps tomorrow we could—" "Actually, William," Jennifer interrupted, "we need to discuss some changes to our arrangement. Lily and I will be staying at my parents' house for the next few days while some repairs are done here." "Repairs?" I echoed, genuinely confused. "What repairs?" "The master bathroom shower is leaking," she replied smoothly. "The plumber needs to open up the wall, which will make a terrible mess. It's better if we aren't here." It was a blatant lie. I had checked every faucet and drain in the house just days ago as part of my regular maintenance routine. The master shower was in perfect working order. "That's strange," I said, maintaining an even tone. "I haven't noticed any leaks. Perhaps I should speak with the plumber myself since I'll be here during the work." A flicker of annoyance crossed Jennifer's face. "That won't be necessary. I've already made all the arrangements. We'll be leaving this afternoon and returning Friday, or possibly Monday, depending on how extensive the repairs turn out to be." I recognized the strategy for what it was, an attempt to establish a precedent for Lily staying elsewhere, gradually transitioning to a permanent arrangement where I had limited access to my granddaughter. It was time to force the issue. "Jennifer, I think we both know there's no leaking shower," I said quietly. "And we both know what you're trying to do." Her artificial smile vanished. "I don't know what you're talking about." "You're trying to separate me from Lily to establish a new normal where I'm not part of her daily life. It won't work. As her legal CO guardian, a ridiculous claim that will be thrown out in court." Jennifer snapped, forgetting for a moment that Lily was still present, watching our exchange with wide, anxious eyes. "Mommy, are you mad at Papa?" Lily asked in a small voice. Jennifer immediately softened her tone, though her eyes remained hard as she glanced at me. No, sweetheart. Grown-ups just have disagreements sometimes. Now go get your raincoat, please. We need to go. Once Lily had left the room, Jennifer leaned close, her voice low and intense. Listen to me, William. I am Lily's mother. I decide what's best for her, not you, and certainly not David from beyond the grave. You can hide behind these legal papers all you want, but in the end, the court will side with me. No judge is going to give custody of a 3-year-old girl to her elderly grandfather over her perfectly capable mother. This isn't about taking Lily from you, I replied, keeping my own voice level. It's about respecting David's wishes that his daughter maintain a relationship with both of us. He wanted us to co-parent Jennifer. Why is that so threatening to you? Because I'm moving on with my life, she hissed. Greg has been offered a position in Chicago, a significant promotion that would benefit both of us. I can't very well take that opportunity with you clinging to some misguided notion of co-parenting. And there it was. The truth laid bare at last. Jennifer's rush to remove me from the picture had nothing to do with grief or healing, and everything to do with her plans to start a new life with Greg, taking Lily with her and leaving behind any connection to David or me. Lily just lost her father, I said, unable to keep a note of disbelief from my voice. She's 3 years old, and you're planning to move her across the country away from her home, her school, her friends, and the only other parent figure in her life for a man she barely knows. Greg is going to be her stepfather, Jennifer replied defiantly. The sooner she gets used to that idea, the better for everyone. Except David wouldn't even be cold in his grave, I observed quietly. Does that mean nothing to you? A flash of something, guilt perhaps, or simply irritation at being challenged, crossed Jennifer's face. Life goes on, William. David would want us to be happy. Don't, I said, anger finally seeping into my voice. Don't you dare presume to speak for my son. David wanted Lily to grow up knowing her family history, to have stability and continuity after his death. That's why he made the arrangements he did. Our confrontation was interrupted by Lily's return, struggling to zip her yellow raincoat. I knelt to help her, forcing a smile I didn't feel. There you go, sunshine. All ready for school. Will you be here when I get home, Papa? She asked her innocent question, cutting straight to the heart of the matter. Before I could answer, Jennifer interjected smoothly. Remember, honey, you're having a play date with Madison after school, and then dinner with Mommy and Greg. You'll see Papa tomorrow. Or perhaps tonight, if you're not too tired when you get home, I added, unwilling to cede the narrative entirely to Jennifer. And definitely tomorrow morning for our special pancake breakfast. Jennifer's lips thinned, but she said nothing more as she ushered Lily out the door, leaving me alone in the suddenly quiet house. I sat heavily at the kitchen table, the remnants of Lily's breakfast still scattered across the surface. The conversation with Jennifer had confirmed my worst fears, while also strengthening my resolve. She was indeed planning to move Lily to Chicago, to start a new life with Greg that had no place for me or for David's memory. But she had underestimated me, and more importantly, she had underestimated David's foresight. My son had anticipated something like this might happen, taking legal steps to ensure his daughter would maintain her connection to both sides of her family. Now it was up to me to see his wishes fulfilled, whatever it took. I reached for my phone and dialed Marty's number. It was time to stop playing defense and start taking more decisive action. Jennifer had made her intentions clear. Now she would discover that I was not the pushover she apparently believed me to be. Marty, I said, when he answered, we need to talk. Jennifer is planning to take Lily to Chicago, and I think we need to request an emergency hearing for temporary custody orders. As I explained the situation to my attorney, I glanced at the family photo still prominently displayed on the living room wall. David, Jennifer, Lily, and me at Lily's third birthday party just months ago. We had all been smiling, a picture-perfect family, with no indication of the tragedy and conflict that lay ahead. "I'm going to fight for you, Lily," I whispered after ending the call. "Your daddy trusted me to be here for you, and that's exactly what I'm going to do." With renewed determination, I began gathering the evidence Marty had requested. Financial records, my log of Jennifer's efforts to limit my time with Lily, notes from conversations I had overheard between Jennifer and Greg. The coming legal battle would be difficult and painful, but with David's carefully constructed legal provisions on my side, I stood a fighting chance of preserving my role in my granddaughter's life. As I worked, I found unexpected solace in a memory of David as a teenager, stubbornly insisting on joining the debate team despite his natural shyness. "Sometimes you have to stand up and speak out, Dad," he had told me, even when it's the hardest thing in the world to do. My quiet, thoughtful son had found his voice when it mattered most. Now it was my turn to find mine to speak for him when he no longer could, and to ensure that his final wishes for his daughter were honored. The next 48 hours were a whirlwind of activity. Marty filed an emergency motion with the family court requesting a temporary restraining order to prevent Jennifer from removing Lily from the Seattle area pending a full hearing on custody arrangements. Based on the evidence I had gathered, particularly Jennifer's stated intention to relocate to Chicago, the judge granted the order and scheduled a hearing for the following week. Jennifer was furious when she was served with the papers at her office. She called me immediately, her voice tight with barely controlled rage. "A restraining order. Really, William, you're going to drag this through the courts and put Lily through that kind of stress?" "I'm simply ensuring that David's wishes for his daughter are respected," I replied calmly. "He wanted Lily to have both of us in her life, not to be whisked away to Chicago with a man she barely knows." "Greg and I are getting married," she snapped. "He's going to be her stepfather, a positive male influence in her life. Isn't that what you would want for her?" "What I want is for her to maintain connection with her father's family, to grow up knowing who David was and how much he loved her. And yes, to have positive male influences, including her grandfather, who has been a constant presence in her life since birth." Jennifer's tone turned coldly calculating. "You know, William, courts tend to favor younger guardians for small children. At your age, how many more years can you realistically expect to be able to care for an active young girl?" The implied threat stung, targeting one of my deepest insecurities. At 62, I was indeed older than the typical guardian for a 3-year-old. But I was in good health, active, and fully capable of keeping up with Lily, something I had demonstrated daily since moving into David and Jennifer's home. "My age didn't seem to concern you when you wanted free childcare," I observed. "Besides, David considered my age and health when he named me co-guardian. He had faith in my ability to help raise his daughter." "We'll see what the judge has to say about that," Jennifer retorted before hanging up. True to her word about staying at her parents' house, Jennifer did not bring Lily home that evening. When I called to say goodnight to my granddaughter, Jennifer claimed Lily was already asleep, though I could hear her voice chattering in the background. The next morning, my attempts to reach them went straight to voicemail. I channeled my anxiety and frustration into preparation for the upcoming hearing, working closely with Marty to organize our evidence and arguments. We decided to focus on 3 key points: David's clear legal directive naming me as co-guardian, the stability and continuity I provided in Lily's life, and the potential harm of removing her from her home and support system so soon after losing her father. What about Jennifer's relationship with Greg? I asked Marty during one of our planning sessions. Should we bring up evidence of their affair while David was alive? Marty considered this carefully. It's relevant to her character and judgment, but we need to be careful. The court's primary concern is Lily's well-being, not punishing Jennifer for infidelity. We'll mention it if necessary, but our focus should be on what's best for Lily going forward, not dwelling on past betrayals. The morning of the hearing arrived with a sense of nervous anticipation. I dressed carefully in my best suit, the same one I had worn to David's funeral just 3 weeks earlier, and drove to the courthouse, arriving early as Marty had advised. Jennifer was already there with her attorney, the formidable Stephanie Keller, and to my surprise, Greg. They sat huddled together at one end of the hallway, outside the courtroom, occasionally glancing in my direction with barely concealed hostility. I maintained my composure, focusing on reviewing my notes one last time before we were called inside. The hearing itself was both more formal and more emotional than I had anticipated. Judge Eleanor Harmon, a stern-faced woman in her 50s, began by expressing condolences for David's passing before establishing the parameters of the proceeding. "This is not a final determination of custody," she explained. "We are here today to establish temporary arrangements that serve the best interests of the minor child, Lily Mitchell, until a more comprehensive review can be completed." Jennifer's attorney went first, painting a picture of a grieving widow, trying to rebuild a life for herself and her daughter, only to be hindered by an overreaching father-in-law who refused to accept changing circumstances. "Mr. Mitchell is attempting to substitute himself for his deceased son," Ms. Keller argued. "While his devotion to his granddaughter is commendable, it does not override Ms. Mitchell's fundamental rights as Lily's mother to make decisions about where and how they will live." She went on to suggest that my age and health made me an inappropriate guardian for a young child, and that the codicil in David's will regarding joint custody was likely the result of undue influence on my part during a time when my son was vulnerable due to health concerns. "Furthermore," she continued, "the Mitchell family home is a painful reminder of loss for both Jennifer and Lily. Remaining there serves Mr. Mitchell's emotional needs, not the child's best interests." When it was Marty's turn to speak, he systematically dismantled these arguments, presenting evidence of my ongoing role in Lily's care, documentation of the stable environment I provided, and most powerfully, David's clear legal directives. "David Mitchell was of sound mind and body when he updated his will," Marty emphasized. "He made a thoughtful, deliberate choice to ensure his daughter would maintain a relationship with both her mother and her paternal grandfather. The court should honor his wishes, particularly given the trauma Lily has already experienced in losing her father at such a young age." Marty also introduced evidence of Jennifer's plans to relocate to Chicago with Greg, arguing that such a move would further destabilize Lily's life at a critical time in her development and grief process. "The child has lost her father," he said, his voice softening with genuine emotion. "She should not also lose her home, her school, her friends, and her relationship with her grandfather, the last living link to her father." Throughout these presentations, I maintained a composed demeanor, though inwardly I was a storm of emotions. When Judge Harmon called me to testify, I spoke from the heart about my relationship with Lily, my commitment to honoring David's memory and wishes, and my deep concern about the impact of further disruption on my granddaughter's well-being. "I'm not trying to replace Jennifer as Lily's parent," I explained in response to one of the judge's questions. "I simply want to continue being her grandfather, to read her bedtime stories, to make pancakes on Sunday mornings, to tell her about her father and the wonderful man he was." David wanted Lily to know her family history, to understand where she came from. I'm the keeper of those memories now, and I take that responsibility very seriously. When Jennifer took the stand, her testimony struck a careful balance between acknowledging my role in Lily's life and asserting her authority as mother. She spoke of her plans with Greg in Chicago as an opportunity for a fresh start, a chance to build a new family unit that would include Lily. Of course, William could visit, she stated, though her tone suggested such visits would be rare and closely supervised. We would never want him out of Lily's life entirely, but the daily caretaking and decision-making needs to rest with me, her mother. When Ms. Keller asked about her relationship with Greg, Jennifer described it as a recent development, a comfort that had emerged from shared grief over David's passing. Greg, she explained, had been David's colleague and friend, stepping in to support her during this difficult time. I had to bite my tongue to keep from objecting to this blatant misrepresentation. The hotel receipts and credit card statements in my possession told a very different story, one of an affair that predated David's death by at least several months. Finally, Judge Harmon called a brief recess to review the evidence and arguments before rendering her decision. I sat quietly in the hallway, mentally preparing myself for all possible outcomes. Would Lily remain in Seattle with some form of shared custody? Would Jennifer be granted permission to relocate with certain visitation requirements? Would I lose my granddaughter despite David's careful planning? When we reconvened, Judge Harmon's expression gave nothing away as she began to speak. "This is without question a difficult case," she began. "We have a child who has suffered a tremendous loss, two adults who clearly care for her well-being, and the expressed wishes of her deceased father to consider. In such circumstances, the court must prioritize stability and continuity while respecting the legal rights of all parties involved." She paused, reviewing her notes before continuing. "Having carefully considered the evidence presented, I am issuing the following temporary orders effective immediately and remaining in force until a final determination can be made following a more comprehensive evaluation." My heart pounded as I waited for her decision. First, Lily Mitchell will remain in the family home in Seattle, which is to be her primary residence. Second, Mr. William Mitchell and Ms. Jennifer Mitchell will share physical custody on an alternating weekly basis with transitions occurring on Sunday evenings. Third, major decisions regarding Lily's education, health, and welfare are to be made jointly with disputes to be mediated through the court, if necessary. I felt a wave of relief wash over me. Lily would stay in Seattle in her home with me, playing a significant role in her care. It wasn't a complete victory, but it was a meaningful acknowledgement of David's wishes and my place in Lily's life. Judge Harmon wasn't finished, however. Additionally, neither party is to remove Lily from King County without the court's permission. Ms. Mitchell, if you wish to relocate to Chicago or elsewhere, you will need to file a formal request with this court, which will be considered based on Lily's best interests at that time. She fixed Jennifer with a stern look. The court takes a dim view of attempts to circumvent these orders or to alienate a child from either guardian. I strongly encourage both parties to put aside their personal differences and focus on providing Lily with the stable, loving environment she needs during this difficult transition. With that, she closed her folder and adjourned the hearing, leaving Jennifer visibly fuming beside her attorney, while I sat in stunned gratitude. It wasn't the end of our legal battle, far from it, but it was an important first step in ensuring that David's wishes for his daughter would be respected. As we left the courtroom, Jennifer caught up to me in the hallway, her voice low and intense. "This isn't over, William. Not by a long shot. I'll fight you every step of the way if I have to." I looked at her. This woman who had once seemed to make my son happy, who had given him the precious gift of Lily, and who now seemed determined to erase his memory and legacy. Despite everything, I felt a flicker of compassion for her, recognizing the complex mix of grief, guilt, and desperation that might be driving her actions. "It doesn't have to be a fight, Jennifer," I said quietly. "We could work together, find a way to co-parent that honors David's memory and gives Lily the stable, loving family she deserves." For just a moment, something flickered in her eyes. Uncertainty, perhaps, or a hint of the woman David had fallen in love with. Then her expression hardened again. "See you Sunday," she said curtly. "I'll bring Lily back by 7. As she walked away, I turned to Marty with a mixture of relief and trepidation. "What happens now?" "Now," he said, placing a supportive hand on my shoulder. "We prepare for the long haul. This was just round 1, Bill. Jennifer isn't going to give up easily, especially with Chicago still calling her name. But we've established solid ground to stand on, and that's no small victory." He was right, of course. The real work was just beginning. Not just the legal battles that likely lay ahead, but the more important challenge of helping Lily navigate this complex new reality. How would I explain to my 3-year-old granddaughter why she was bouncing between households each week? How could I shield her from the tension between her mother and me while still maintaining appropriate boundaries? As I drove home from the courthouse, I found myself talking aloud to David, as I often did since his death. "I'm trying, son. I promise you, I'm doing everything I can to keep my promise to you. To be there for Lily, to make sure she knows how much you loved her." In the quiet of the car, I could almost hear his response, his calm, thoughtful voice reminding me that love was more important than legal victories, that what Lily needed most was not perfection, but presence. "I'll be there," I whispered. "No matter what comes next, I'll be there." 3 years have passed since that final court hearing. 3 years of challenges, growth, and unexpected healing. Lily is now 6 years old, a bright, resilient first grader who still bears her father's smile and kind heart, though her memories of him have faded to impressions and feelings rather than clear recollections. My role as keeper of those memories has become even more important as time passes, preserving David's presence in her life through stories, photographs, and family traditions that connect her to the father she was too young to know fully. The custody arrangement established by Judge Harmon has remained largely unchanged, though its implementation has evolved in ways I could not have anticipated on that tense day in the courtroom. The most significant change came 6 months after the ruling, when Jennifer made a decision that surprised everyone involved in our long legal battle. "I'm not going to Chicago," she announced during one of our now regular co-parenting discussions. "Greg took the position and moved last month. We've decided to take some time apart." I was careful to hide my relief, focusing instead on what this meant for Lily. "So, you'll be staying in Seattle?" Jennifer nodded, a new weariness evident in her expression. "Yes. I've been offered a promotion at my current firm. It makes sense professionally, and more importantly, it's what Lily needs right now. You were right about that much, William. She needs stability and connection to David's memory, and that means staying here close to you and everything familiar." The admission clearly cost her some pride, but it marked a turning point in our relationship. With the immediate threat of relocation removed and the custody arrangement settled by the court, we were finally able to focus on what truly mattered, creating a supportive, cooperative environment for Lily's benefit. Progress was slow and sometimes faltering. Old resentments and communication patterns didn't disappear overnight. There were still difficult transitions, disagreements about parenting approaches, and occasional flare-ups of tension. But gradually, almost imperceptibly, something shifted between Jennifer and me. Perhaps it was simply the passage of time softening the raw edges of grief and conflict. Perhaps it was witnessing Lily's obvious relief and happiness as the adults in her life began working together rather than against each other. Or perhaps it was the shared recognition that David would have wanted this for his daughter. A family that, however unconventional, functioned with her well-being at its center. Jennifer began inviting me to school events that fell during her time with Lily, recognizing the importance of having both of us present for significant moments. I reciprocated by being flexible with the custody schedule when work obligations or social opportunities arose for Jennifer, understanding that her happiness and fulfillment were also important to Lily's well-being. Most meaningfully, we established a tradition of spending the anniversary of David's death together as a family, visiting the cemetery in the morning, and then sharing a meal where we would take turns telling Lily stories about her father. The first such anniversary was awkward and emotionally raw, but by the third year, this past spring, it had transformed into something healing and even at moments joyful. "Daddy would have thought this was so funny," Lily declared at our most recent memorial lunch after I had shared a story about David's disastrous attempt to bake Catherine a birthday cake as a teenager. "He's probably laughing in heaven right now." Jennifer and I exchanged glances across the table, a moment of genuine connection in our shared love for the man we had both lost and the child who carried his legacy. As for me, I have found my own path forward through grief toward a life I never expected but have come to deeply appreciate. At 65, I am more active and engaged than many of my contemporaries, keeping up with an energetic first grader and managing the household we still share. I've developed friendships with other grandparents raising grandchildren through a support group at my church, finding community and understanding among those walking similar paths. Jennifer has changed too in ways that suggest personal growth rather than mere accommodation to circumstances. After her relationship with Greg ended, she focused on her career and on developing a parenting style that balanced her natural drive and ambition with greater emotional presence and attunement to Lily's needs. She began seeing a therapist, later explaining to me that she was working through issues related to her own childhood and patterns in her relationships. About a year ago, Jennifer started dating again, this time with greater transparency and consideration for how new relationships might affect Lily. She recently introduced us to Daniel, a kind, thoughtful architect she has been seeing for several months. I was prepared to feel territorial or protective, but found myself genuinely hoping this relationship brings her happiness. Lily deserves a mother who is fulfilled and at peace, just as she deserves a grandfather who has found his own healing. The family home that was once the focus of such bitter contention has become a genuinely shared space. Jennifer still maintains her own apartment for her personal time and overnight visits with Daniel, but she is a regular presence in what we now simply call Lily's house. We've even undertaken some renovation projects together, updating the kitchen and creating a special daddy corner in the living room where Lily can go when she wants to feel close to David. A space filled with his photos, favorite books, and small mementos. There are still challenges, of course. Lily sometimes struggles with the complicated emotions of growing up without her father asking increasingly sophisticated questions about death and loss as her understanding matures. The custody schedule, while stable, requires ongoing coordination and occasional adjustments as Lily's school and social activities become more demanding. And there are days when the old tensions between Jennifer and me resurface, when the wounds of past conflicts feel freshly painful. But these challenges now exist within a framework of mutual respect and shared commitment to Lily's well-being. We have learned through trial and error to communicate more effectively, to give each other the benefit of the doubt, and to recognize that our different strengths as caregivers provide Lily with a richer, more balanced upbringing than either of us could offer alone. Most importantly, Lily is thriving. She is academically advanced for her age, socially confident, and emotionally resilient. A child who knows she is deeply loved by many people, including the father she carries in her heart. She speaks of David naturally and without the heavy sadness that once accompanied his name, integrating his memory into her understanding of herself and her family in a healthy, age-appropriate way. "Grandpa," she asked recently, as I tucked her into bed, "do you think Daddy would be proud of our family now? Even though it's different from when he was here." I considered her question carefully, wanting to honor both her insight and her need for reassurance. "I think your daddy would be very proud," I told her. "Not because our family is perfect, no family is, but because we all love you so much and try our best to take care of each other. That's what families are supposed to do, and your daddy would be so happy to see how well we're doing that now." She nodded, satisfied with this answer. "I think so too. And I think he's still part of our family, even though we can't see him." "He absolutely is," I agreed, kissing her forehead. "He'll always be your daddy, and we'll always keep his love alive in this house and in our hearts." As I reflect on the journey from that devastating moment at David's funeral, when Jennifer coldly told me to stop crying and pack my bags, to the hard-won peace we have established today, I am filled with gratitude for many things. For David's foresight in creating legal protections that gave me the standing to fight for my place in Lily's life. For the wisdom of Judge Harmon, Patricia Lawson, and Dr. Jenkins in recognizing what Lily truly needed during a time of profound loss and transition. For Jennifer's eventual willingness to put aside her own plans and preferences for her daughter's benefit. But most of all, I am grateful for Lily herself, this remarkable child who has been both the focus of our conflict and the catalyst for our healing. Her resilience, her open heart, and her innate wisdom have taught all the adults in her life important lessons about what truly matters. In trying to provide stability and support for her, we have found our own paths toward recovery and reconciliation. David's death left a hole in our family that can never truly be filled. But around that absence, we have built something new and unexpectedly beautiful. A family defined not by traditional roles or biological connections, but by commitment, care, and the enduring power of love that transcends even death itself. Have you ever had to stand up for what was right during your darkest hour? Have you found healing and reconciliation after a painful family conflict? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this journey has touched your heart in some way, please consider subscribing and sharing it with others who might find comfort or courage in knowing that even the most painful endings can lead to new beginnings. Thank you for walking this path with me today. And remember, sometimes our greatest strength emerges precisely when we feel most broken.